to the flight deck. If you are just now joining us, we are at flight level 230, cruising along happily at 306 knots indicated. Ground speed of 286 knots en route to Anchorage, and we're about 100 miles away from Kenai VOR, and we'll be starting our descent into Anchorage here shortly, preparing for our arrival, doing some descent calculations. Right now we're looking out at a volcano that I'm going to try to pronounce. I'll probably butcher it, but I believe it is Iliamna volcano, about 10,000 feet right here. And then beyond that is Mount Redoubt. Interesting fun fact about Mount Redoubt is it was actually had multiple eruptions back in March and April of March through April of 2009, resulting in a 25,000 foot high ash cloud, as well as ash accumulation throughout the Cook Inlet region. So volcano activity still happening around the Aleutians and the Alaskan Peninsula, and that is Cook Inlet right there off to our right, and that's Iliamna Lake back here, a big body of water. And so we're going to go ahead and just do a couple things to set up for the arrival, and then we'll share some fun facts. But let's get in here. I'm going to bring up our multifunction display controller, Shift 4, and let's go in and use our procedure key, and we're going to select the arrival that we're going to be flying, and that will be the Amit 8 arrival. So we're going to enter that. We're going to use the Kenai transition, so that's good, and then all runways, we'll enter it and load it. So it's in there, and you can see it's going to dogleg over to the left once we get to Kenai. So the other thing we'll do while we're in here, we'll go ahead and select the approach that we're anticipating, and that is the, let's see, enter, that's going to be runway ILS 7 right approach. So we'll enter that, and we'll use the vectors, and we'll go ahead and load that in there as well. So it's not activated, but it's loaded. And also while we're in here, we can go ahead and get some frequencies for the airport tuned in. And so we'll come over to the waypoint page. Let's get a cursor, and let's put in Anchorage, which is Papa Alpha November Charlie. And then let's enter that, and then come down. Let's enter that. There we go. Move the cursor down here. So the ATIS frequency is not 135.5, and it is in the real world, but not in my world here. It's actually 118.4, which is pretty close to this. So I think I'll use that one. I'll tune it in there. And let's see, it'll put it up here in COM 1. That's fine, because we're on COM 2 now. So 119.4, and then I just need to adjust the 9 to 8 and flip that over there. Now let me double check and be sure that was right. It's either 118.4 or 118.3. Yep, 118.4. So got that up there, and we'll monitor that. We won't pick it up for a while, but we got it in there. And we can go ahead and put our tower frequency in too. And our ground frequency. Let's put the ground frequency in. We'll put it right there. So we'll enter that, 121.9. Now I'm going to change that just slightly so we don't really have to listen to the robots talk. And I got it to change that here. Here we go, 180. There we go. And I'll leave that there, and we'll call that ground. And then the tower down here is 118.3. And let's put that one in COM 2. We'll be ready for the tower. And this is our approach frequency we're using. So enter that, and now we got the tower set up. So all that looks good. And let's go back to our flight plan page, and then we'll close out that. And we're good to go there. So we're pretty much set up for the descent. We're going to start descending at about 40 miles out. So we got a little bit time to share some fun facts and look at the scenery here, cruising along. Fuel status right now, we've got still 700 pounds in each tank, each of our main tanks. That's 1,400 total, so plenty of fuel. And it's been a great flight. Had a few thunderstorms that we had to circumnavigate, but other than that, everything's gone just as smooth as silk. So we'll keep it that way. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit just about some of the accidents, notable accidents, I should say, of the King Air and one other. There was one back in 2004. If you're a NASCAR fan, you'll recognize the name Hendrick Motorsports. This one was called the Hendrick Motorsports crash. It was a Super King Air 200. It crashed short of the runway at Blue Ridge Airport in Martinsville, Virginia, killing members of NASCAR team owner Rick Hendrick's family, including John Hendrick, president of Hendrick Motorsports, and Ricky Hendrick, who was a NASCAR Busch Series driver. And this became known as the 2004 Martinsville aircraft crash, as the passengers were on their way to the Martinsville NASCAR race. Also, that's a terrible tragedy, and condolences to the Hendrick's family. Also, there was another incident, I'll call this one, in 2009. Now this is really crazy. An unruly passenger was able to open the cabin door while a B200 King Air was flying at 33,000 feet over northern Canada and jumped to his death. The aircraft depressurized and the pilot had to make an emergency landing. There were no other casualties. That guy was nuts. I don't know who he was, but there was something off there. Another King Air crash, which was recent, was in October of 2014, a Super King Air. By the way, I probably already mentioned this. The Super was dropped, I think, in 1996. But this one was a Super King Air 200. It crashed at Wichita Dwight D. Eisenhower National Airport. And that was on takeoff. They lost an engine. The pilot declared an emergency. Said he lost the left engine. The aircraft subsequently crashed into a Flight Safety International building located at the airport. There were 4 fatalities and 5 injuries. How ironic, because flight safety is where you go to train on simulators what to do in the event of a engine failure, among other emergency situations, and all types of different simulators there. So tragic. Another crash I wanted to talk about was one that involved Senator Ted Stevens, of whom Anchorage Airport is named after. This crash was in December of 1978. Involved a Learjet 25C. It was en route from Juneau when it crashed upon landing. On board were U.S. Senator Ted Stevens, his wife Ann, a gentleman named Langhorne Motley, who later became the U.S. ambassador to Brazil, and 4 others. Motley and Ted Stevens were the only survivors. Tragic crash right on the at the Anchorage airport. Later, in 2010, Senator Stevens died when a de Havilland, Canada DHC-3 Otter, he and several others were flying in, crashed en route to a private fishing lodge. So Alaska depends highly on aviation. There's lots of aviation around Alaska. It's in many cases the only way to travel. And terrible tragic accident there, and the airport has since been named after Senator Stevens for his long service as a senator representing the state of Alaska. So just looking, we're about 53 miles out right now, and we should be getting a descent shortly. And so in preparation, what I'm going to do is very carefully come over here and go ahead and select an altitude of, now this won't start our descent just yet, but it will, what it's going to do, it's going to give us our altitude selection, what's that called? Altitude selection intercept something. The banana. That's going to show us where we need to, where we're going to intercept our target altitude. And that's going to help us in the descent. So I'm going to go ahead and set that. Now we're still cruising along happily at flight level 230. And once they give us the go ahead, then we'll start the descent down. And we'll stop, of course, at any restricted altitudes. So that's set up. And we should be in about 7 or 8 miles, being just about ready to stop, which gives me just enough time for maybe another fun fact before we start that descent. And this one involves Anchorage. It's about the diverse wildlife population that exists within urban Anchorage and the surrounding area. There are approximately 250 black bears and 60 grizzly bears that live in the area. I don't know who counted them, but somebody did. And the bears are regularly sighted within the city. Also, moose are a common sight in the Anchorage area. There's a summer population of approximately 250, increasing to as many as 1,000 during the winter. They are a hazard to drivers, with over 100 moose killed by cars each year. I'd hate to hit one of those guys. And 2 people were stomped to death in 1993 and 1995 in Anchorage. That's a pretty bad way to go, I gotta say. Hang on, I'm getting a call. Approach. Down to 1000 for King Air 0 Yankee Kilo. We just got cleared for our descent, so we're gonna come into the vertical speed mode, and we're going to dial it down to 1,000 feet per minute. We're going to ease our power back slightly, keep us from overspeeding, and we're going to use about 86% on the N1. So there's 700, 800, 900, 1,000, and checking in on N1, we're coming down to 87%. We'll adjust that slightly, but let's go ahead and drop our cabin, start that depressurizing, and 500 feet will be above field elevation, and we'll just look in and be sure we're in the descent. We are, so that looks good. And to keep from overspeeding in the descent, and we want to keep our speed up, we're doing 283 knots across the ground. That's good. And 87% right now on the N1, so I'm going to power back slightly. And as we descend, we'll have to continue to monitor that. We get into thicker air and continue to reduce power. Just as we increased in the climb, we've got to reduce in the descent. So there's 85.3. We'll call that good. And let's do our descent checklist. So we've set our pressurization, vertical speed, altimeter. We're waiting for the ATIS. Problem is, we won't pick the ATIS up until we're much closer to Anchorage, so in theory we should have already had the ATIS when we contacted approach, but for whatever reason, Flight Simulator, I can't pick it up until I'm right at the airport. But we'll take care of that once we get up there a little bit closer. We'll go ahead and get our occupants strapped up for the arrival. Coming down through 21,000 feet. And one still looking good. Now our anti-ice windshield, we've got it set on normal, so it's heated so it won't frost up on us. And once we get down to 10,000 feet, we'll cut on our recognition lights. So we're good in the descent right now. Fuel status looks good. No caution lights, no warning lights. Everything's in the green on the engines. We're all set there. We're at 1,700 RPMs on the props. Condition levers are set where they're supposed to be. Trims are set. Everything looks good. So we've got another couple of minutes here. Let's see what else we have about Anchorage. Anchorage is draws national attention. It is focused on it the first Saturday of each March with the Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race, which kicks off its ceremonial start on downtown Anchorage on 4th Avenue. That is, the Iditarod is referred to as the last great race on Earth. It's a about 1,100 mile race from Anchorage to Nome, Alaska. And the record was set in 2014. It took 8 days, 13 hours and change to race. You start the race with something like 16 dogs. I think you have to end with at least 6. And a very tough terrain, challenging race, 1,100 miles in 8 days. You do the math, that's a lot of miles per day. And you have to sleep sometimes. So what else about Anchorage? There's one highway in Anchorage, and it is one state highway, I should say, is Alaska Route 1. And southbound, it's known as the Seward Highway. It connects Anchorage to the Kenai Peninsula, which is right down here. And there's Kenai Airport that we flew out of, going down to the Aleutians in the Hawker jet. And then eastbound and then northbound, it is known as the Glen Highway. So that's that. And we're coming down through 18,000 feet, so we'll be prepared to set our altimeter to the local setting, and I'll just use the B key since I'm not picking up ATIS at this point. I think I'm going to zoom us in here. I started to do that a while ago, got sidetracked. There we go. And we're about 18 miles now from the VOR, coming down through 18,000. And see, our N1 still looks good. Ground speed 276 knots. I will tell you, I did some calculations. We don't have VNAV with this particular Garmin. And this Garmin is actually a King Air specific design with the engine gauges here the way they are, set up for this particular aircraft. But looking at the descent, basically pretty simple calculation. We were at flight level 230. We needed to come down to 2,000. That's 21,000 feet, 1,000 feet per minute, which is what we're descending. Means it'll take 21 minutes. And at 275 knots ground speed, that's 4.6 miles per minute, and that calculates out about 97 nautical miles. So that's why I just started the descent out here after adding up the legs. And that's a rough calculation. Now I can look for the banana here, and I probably need to zoom out to do that. I think I'll bring up this handy dandy. Let's zoom this out here and see if we see the banana. Got to go out. And it's way up there. It looks like it's at this point that we would not intercept. Here's Thule, which is the final approach fix, but we've got to make a turn here and then here, so we'll keep an eye on that. But I think we're still going to be okay on our descent rate. I'm not going to change it just yet. A little later if I need to. We'll come back in and check on that a little while later. And we flew by Mount Redoubt. I really wanted to get a closer look at it, but I think I got busy yapping. But we did get it's a 10,000 foot peak. We did get a little peep at it. Pretty flat area out here on Kenai Peninsula.
Lux 435 Heavy, Anchorage approach, fly heading 04's, correction, expect runway 7 left.